Welcome to Business Manual, Audio Manual. This is the part of the show where I take a topic that I've made a bunch of videos on and I'm just gonna say my thoughts on it. Off the cuff, no script on this one, just gonna see how we feel and talk about stuff. Today's episode is about armor. This is the armor talk. And there's a lot of stuff with armor in 3.5. I really get into detail with it. I love that there are 3 armor classes. They have to be extra and not just have one armor class, but have 3. You have your regular armor class, you have your flat-footed armor class, and your touch armor class. Already too much, and I love it. Normal armor makes a lot of sense. You get to add a bunch of stuff. You get to add your armor that you have on, you add your shields, any kind of magical armaments you have, and you just get a progressively higher armor class because things will progressively throw more and more dangerous attacks at you. I mean, ancient red dragons have like a plus 44 to hit, so you better have plus 5 full plate mail and rings of protection plus 5 and crazy shields that block fire damage, because you need that, because if you just have the same armor you started with, what's the point? Things aren't going to hit any harder? That is one thing I have against 5e. Obviously, I really enjoy 5e. There's a lot of great stuff in 5e, but like an ancient... Hang on. I gotta look this up right now. Let's do it live. Let's just look it up right now. Let's go on to fantasy search engine. Adult red dragon armor class 5e. Very cute images. Not what I'm looking for. Okay, adult red dragon, huge dragon, chaotic evil, 156 hit points.
Hey everybody, this is Business Editor. Just coming in to say, I don't know why I said 156, it's 256 hit points, so I don't know why. So I'm just gonna let you get back to it. Alright, bye.
And an armor class of 19. You can hit an adult red dragon in 5th edition. If you were using a 3.5 fighter, you could roll a 12 and be 4th level and have a plus 3 modifier, and you're fine. It just... Hang on, what do we got? Only fair. Let's see what we have over here. Monsters. Dragon. True. Oh, right, it's True Dragon. Dragon True. Red Dragon. Alright, challenge rating, blah, 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 blah. Here's an adult red dragon. It's huge. Armor class. Adult red dragon is a 29. And it's flat-footed 29 too. Oh my goodness. Its touch AC is 8. Yeah, so that's one thing right there. It's just things, there's a certain progression that I feel like is missed in 5e level by level. And that's something that a player character of mine in a 5th edition game I'm running was talking about. He's like, hey, when do we get to add points to like our ability scores and our skill scores? Because he comes from Final Fantasy, he loves everything Final Fantasy, and we're leveling up, we're getting more hit points, we're getting more class abilities, but we're not getting anything to our character. Like, our character is only getting more health, his class is upgrading, but he's not. This is getting into a tangent real quick. All right, we're gonna bring it back. So that's the normal. I love flat-footed, because that makes so much sense. If you're caught off guard, it's like, oh, what do you do? It's like, oh, it's in the rulebook. You just take away the dexterity modifier. But there's nothing for that in 5e. And it's just, I feel like it's kind of an oversight, but they really wanted to simplify and not have you keep track of 3 different armor classes every time you level up or your abilities increase or something. And touch armor class, I really like how that whole system is implemented. I tend to enjoy most of how magic is run in 5th edition a little bit more than 3.5. I like how everybody's basically a sorcerer or a bard in 5e, where you just have the things you've chosen for the day, and you can pop in with just like, hey, I'm guessing this one, I'm guessing this one, I'm guessing this one twice actually, I'm guessing this one at a higher level. I do like that with 5th edition. I feel like that kind of works easier with managing things. But I do really like how touch AC works and how just useless the melee and ranged weapon attacks for spellcasters is, because they're just not as trained in it, so it's harder to hit things. It's like, oh yeah, your aim isn't going to be as good because usually things have to save against your spells instead of you shooting stuff at them. But it makes so much sense. It's like, oh, if I'm aiming a ray of enfeeblement, it's not gonna bounce off your armor. It's gonna hit you. It has any part of you. So it's just like, well, you better be able to dodge out of the way. And if you're wearing super heavy armor, that doesn't make a difference. armor check penalties. I really enjoy the concept. It is really annoying when you're playing a character in full plate mail with a heavy shield and you're taking like a -8 to everything. That is rough. But I like to think of it as, well, if you're traveling on the road and you don't want to get slowed down, maybe you have a pair of leather armor, like studded leather armor, that you just wear as you're exploring, as you're going into a dungeon. Especially if you have a bag of holding, you can just put your armor in there. But if you're going into a dungeon, maybe you wear light armor so that you can maneuver your way around and not get caught in traps. And if you know something's coming up ahead, you and your buddies can like hold things off. You can get your full armor on, and now you're ready to go against the big guy. And I like that. And like, you can sleep in light armor, but not in heavy armor. So it makes so much sense of just like, okay, maybe I just keep this studded leather armor that I had at the beginning, because at least that gives me some form of protection. But if we're wandering around and I'm trying to climb this mountain, I'm not gonna do it in full plate mail. And because 5e lumps all of the different skills into athletics and acrobatics, like balance and tumble and climb and swim and jump, you can't just give disadvantage on everything, otherwise it wouldn't be sustainable in the advantage-disadvantage kind of rule set they have going. So I completely understand disadvantage on stealth. That makes sense. But there's so many like boots of elven kind, cloaks of elven kind, where it's just like, all right, now we don't have to worry about that. It's just a straight roll. You're fine. And suddenly any armor is basically perfect for any character. Whereas these, it's like, hey, you want to wear full plate mail and a heavy shield, or heaven forbid a tower shield? You're gonna have to deal with a lot of consequences for that extra armor bonus, but you also need that armor bonus because things are hitting harder every level. And I feel like that's just kind of lost in 5e, is just things hitting harder. Things are gonna get like a +4 to attack, and like big things like, oh my goodness, this thing has a +10 to attack? This must be like an end boss. Whereas in 3.5, it's like, oh, it's got a +10 to attack, so it's like level 5? I really like how smaller creatures just automatically get a +1 bonus to armor class, because that makes sense, it's a smaller target. I like how they can hit things easier because it's a bigger target. All right, what do we got here? Armor speed. I also enjoy that it actually is detrimental to how fast you can run, and especially overland travel. Because yes, going from 30 feet to 20 feet or 20 feet to 15 feet is pretty rough in combat. It is rough. You have to plan your movements different. You have to use actions to move again because you have to get in range with people. But I feel like it's more for overland travel in a sense. Because overland travel is basically just your base walking speed divided by 10, that's how many miles an hour you're going. Suddenly, instead of going 3 miles an hour, you're going 2 miles an hour, and you lose 8 miles a day because you're wearing armor. And maybe your party's like, hey, either get on a horse or take off that armor, because you wouldn't just be traveling for days in full plate mail. Arcane spell failure. I also obviously really enjoy this part. I like how it's not just like, oh, you're proficient in this, you can just cast whatever spells. So hang on. If we're talking about 5e, if you take your first level in Fighter and then every other level in Wizard, you can just cast spells in full plate mail? So you can just take whatever downside you had to armor, and the downside to wearing it is you lose 1 level. That is a big downside, especially when you cap at 20. But the upside of having heavy shields and full plate mail while casting spells at no consequence, that's kind of wild, right? I really like how the whole concept is, oh, the armor, it's not that you're not proficient in the armor, it's that it's too bulky. And these somatic components aren't just wiggling your fingers, it's these big movements, Doctor Strange style, spinning your hands around, and if you're wearing armor, it's gonna get in the way. And it's a percentile. It's not just like you take a minus on your attack roll, it's a percentile. It's like, at any given moment, you could just kind of clip the side of the studded leather armor and it just moves your hand the wrong way. And magic is so finicky in 3.5 that it's gonna ruin the whole spell, and there it goes, it's gone. But I like how bards are able to wear light armor because they're used to wearing costumes and making larger gestures, and it's just, man, 3.5 is so well thought out. All right, what's the next thing we're talking about? Donning and doffing. I did not realize that doff was a real word until a buddy of mine, his wife is a doctor, and she's like, yeah, doff, that's like to take off. We're like, I thought that was just like a fantasy term for armor. I was like, no, that's just taking it off. It's fine. I really enjoy how specific, I just really enjoy how specific 3.5 is in general, but I love how specific it is that, like, if you have help, you can get it on quicker, but not everything, because it wouldn't really help to just kind of pull on padded armor by yourself. And I like how there's a downside to donning it hastily and whole mechanics for doing that, so it's not like, oh, I'm just gonna put it on really quick. Well, how long does it take? If it's gonna take more than this amount of time, then it's gonna be difficult. You're gonna start getting attacked, and guess what? You don't have your armor on, so too bad. Or it's just like, how long does it take to take off my armor? Because the ship is sinking, and now I gotta get it off because it's gonna give me a -8 to my swim checks, and actually, no, it's gonna give me -16 because it doubles any... Man, I love 3.5. I love how swim checks specifically double any armor check penalties. Like, somebody thought of that in some meeting room. It was just like, hey, what should we do about swim checks? What do you mean? Well, it's a lot harder to swim in armor than it is to tumble or balance. And somebody else said, that's true. That's a great idea. That's a great point. Here's $5. Go and get a lollipop. It's a really big lollipop. Maximum dexterity bonus. 5e does have this as well. I think it's a really good idea. It makes sense that if you're wearing full plate mail, you can't be a flip guy. Sorry, buddy, you have 60, 80 pounds of armor on you. You're gonna have to not jump around as much as you usually do. The non-proficiencies of armor. Just saying, like, hey, you take the armor check penalty against your attack rolls if you're wearing armor you're not proficient with. Like, you still get the armor bonus, but because you're like a wizard, you're kind of constrained and not able to move the way you normally would. Suddenly, swinging with things is harder to do. And then sleeping in armor, but like taking fatigue for the entire day, that's rough for sleeping in heavy or medium armor. And then if you get fatigue and fatigue again, you're exhausted, and that lasts for an hour, and it's like -6 to everything, to strength and dexterity based stuff. That's wild, man. And, having +1 armor, +1 shield at like lower levels makes sense because things are stacked so that you're fighting with magic items. Because in 3.5, they're like, yeah, they're gonna have a lot of magic items early on. Whereas 5e is like, yeah, you can wait. Don't worry about it. We gave them all their magic item stuff and their class abilities. I really don't know how I want to like wrap this up in any way, because I've been talking for a while, and even though I'm gonna shorten it, it's taken me a while. But I really like how much thought was put into the downsides of armor, because 5e really does not like downsides. They like to make you really cool and like a hero, like a superhero, whereas 3.5 makes you feel like an adventurer, and you could die at any moment. I really like all the ways that it gives you choices to think about. Whereas like this armor against this armor, it's not just a +1 to your armor class, it's also a -1 to all of your checks, and can slow down your movement. Or it could make it harder to cast a spell if you're an arcane caster. Just all these little things that like, okay, this is a big difference. I know it's just one thing, but like if I go from here to here, this could change how I build my character. And I think that's really cool, that just thinking about your armor can give insight into how your character might get built. I don't know. I just really like 3.5. I'm getting too much into the weeds with everything, but man, the idea that the enemies are going to hit you harder and harder each level, so you have to try to keep up with that in some way, whether that's spells, whether that's magic items, whether that's just getting heavier and heavier armor, whether that's crafting specific armor so that you take less of a penalty for wearing heavier armor. There's just so much stuff you can do, and if your characters are just like, oh, but I hate that it slows me down, you can just give them an item that gives them 5 more feet of movement. And suddenly, okay, I'll wear this cool thing. Oh, I guess, oh man, but I don't have two-handed weapon fighting with this, and I'm gonna lose my 1.5 times damage. It's like, well, this shield is really cool, and it can deflect ray attacks back at the caster if they're below 5 of your armor class. I don't know, I just made that up, but that's a cool way to give someone a shield that does something. And I feel like so many people, especially in 5e, are just like, oh, unless I specifically have like a sword and shield thing, I don't need a shield. I'll find some other cool way. Can this be a shield instead? Can I use this as a shield? I don't want a shield. I want to use two-handed stuff. Make shields cool, and make cool shields. Also, I'm probably going to say this every time, Give your players magic spears. Spears are so underused. I love spears. They're my favorite weapon in D&D. But that's probably going to do it for me. I should probably eat something. I've been here for a while rambling about D&D armor, so I should probably go see if my dog's okay. Thanks for listening. If you made it this far, let me know your favorite kind of salad dressing in the comments, I guess, just as proof that, like, hey, I did this and you didn't. But misspell the last letter. All right, bye.